The sound of shattering glass was the only thing loud enough to cut through the silence. My brother Jason stood at the head of the table, his face flushed with wine and rage, shards of crystal scattered at his feet. A moment ago he had been toasting to his newborn son, to legacy, to the empire he claimed he was building. 200 guests, investors, socialites, my parents' carefully curated circle, watched in stunned silence as red wine bled into the white linen tablecloth. But Jason wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me. "You think you're special because you mixed some chemicals in a basement?" he sneered, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the seaside villa. "You're a tool tailor. A glorified lab assistant. That company, those formulas, they exist because I let them exist. I planted the seeds in your head. I built the strategy. You just did the grunt work." He pointed a trembling finger at me. 80%. That's my share. You sign over the rights tonight, or I will burn your reputation so thoroughly you won't be able to get a job washing beakers. My parents sat on either side of him, sipping their drinks, their eyes fixed on the centerpiece, refusing to meet my gaze. It was the most expensive silence I had ever heard. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stood there for a long moment, the scent of expensive Merlot filling the air, heavy and cloying. In movies, this is the part where the victim screams, throws a drink back or flips the table. But I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me, a physical drop in temperature that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. I looked at my mother, Patricia. She was smoothing a wrinkle in the tablecloth, her jaw set tight, refusing to lift her eyes. I looked at my father, Richard. He was swirling his drink, studying the vortex of the liquid as if it held the secrets of the universe. They weren't shocked by Jason's cruelty. They were waiting for me to absorb it. They were waiting for me to apologize for provoking him, to make myself small so the party could continue. For 29 years I had played that role. The peacemaker. The buffer. The one who absorbed the shock so the golden boy wouldn't have to feel a bump in the road. But looking at the shards of glass near my sandals, I realized the road had run out. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. Jason smirked, likely thinking I was calling a lawyer or recording him. He stepped forward, chest puffed out, ready for a fight. "Go ahead," he taunted. "Call whoever you want. No one cares." I didn't open my contacts. I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the pending transaction I had set up just an hour ago. A gift for my new nephew, a college fund starter that represented 6 months of my savings. $50,000. A peace offering. A bribe for love I would never receive. I tapped the transaction. The screen refreshed. Transfer cancelled. The money sat back in my account, heavy and safe. I locked the screen and slipped the phone back into my bag. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at Jason again. I simply turned on my heel and walked toward the double doors. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum where the air used to be. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a steady rhythmic countdown to my departure. "Walk away, Taylor." Jason shouted after me, his voice cracking slightly, the bravado slipping just an inch. "Walk away and don't come back until you're ready to sign." I didn't pause. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into the cool night air. The ocean breeze hit my face, salty and clean, scrubbing away the suffocating perfume of the ballroom. The valet brought my car around, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper, looking absurdly out of place among the rows of luxury SUVs and sports cars. As I drove away from the villa, watching the lights fade in my rearview mirror, I expected the tears to finally come. I waited for the sob, the shaking, the grief. But the highway stretched out before me, empty and dark, and all I felt was a terrifying clarity. It wasn't a breakdown. It was an awakening. The family I thought I was fighting for didn't exist. There was only a corporation of ego and I had just resigned. I drove for an hour in silence, the radio off, the only sound the hum of tires on asphalt. When I finally pulled up to my apartment complex, a gray, blocky building with peeling paint and a flickering street lamp, it looked beautiful. It looked like mine. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked my door and stepped into the quiet. No screaming. No shattering glass. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the smell of the lavender candle I had burned the night before. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and for the first time in my life, I understood the difference between being lonely and being free. My apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that usually unnerved me, but tonight it felt like armor. I sat at my desk, a wobbly laminate table I had bought secondhand for $20, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the stack of notebooks next to it. These weren't just journals. They were 10 years of chemistry, biology, and sleepless nights. They were the roadmap to a $60 million empire that my family believed just magically appeared out of thin air. I opened a new spreadsheet. My hands were steady now, driven by a cold, analytical need to see the truth in black and white. Jason had called me a tool. He claimed he planted the seeds. I decided to audit the garden. Item 1, the credit card debt. 5 years ago, Jason had maxed out 3 cards trying to launch a lifestyle brand that consisted of printed t-shirts nobody bought. My parents had called me, weeping about how the stress was killing them. I paid off $15,000. I told myself it was an investment in family peace. Item 2, the emergency loans. The car repairs. The rent for his penthouse when his cash flow was temporarily tight. The medical bills for our mother that somehow always landed in my mailbox while Jason posted photos from Tulum. I typed in the numbers, watching the total climb. But the financial cost was nothing compared to the time. 10 years. That was how long I had spent in the basement of a rented house, inhaling fumes, testing essential oils until my nose bled, searching for the perfect molecular bond that would make a scent linger for days without turning stale. I did that while Jason played golf. I did that while my parents bragged about Jason's potential at dinner parties where I wasn't even introduced. Why had I done it? Why had I handed over my money, my time, and my dignity for so long? The answer wasn't simple. It was a program installed in my brain when I was 12 years old. I remember the day clearly. It was a Tuesday. I had won the regional science fair, a $50 prize and a blue ribbon. I ran home, bursting with pride, ready to show my father. But when I got to the living room, the mood was heavy. Jason, then 17, had crashed his car. My father didn't look at my ribbon. He looked at the $50 in my hand. "Taylor," he had said, his voice heavy with a twisted kind of solemnity. "Your brother is in trouble. He needs us. We're a team, right?" He took the money from my hand. He didn't ask. He took it. And then my mother knelt down and whispered the words that would become the soundtrack of my life. "Being a good sister means giving up what you have so he can shine. That is your purpose, Taylor. To be the soil so he can be the tree." I believed them. For 17 years, I believed that my value was measured only by how much I could bleed for him. I thought if I gave enough, eventually they would love me. I thought if I was the perfect soil, eventually they would thank me for the harvest. But looking at the spreadsheet now, the total staring back at me in stark black pixels, I realized the lie. I wasn't the soil. I was the architect. I was the builder. I was the bank. I closed the laptop. The blue light faded, plunging the room back into darkness. The golden child myth had shattered along with that wine glass. They didn't own 80% of my company. They didn't own 1% of my soul. I wasn't their investment anymore. I was a closed account. And as I walked to my bedroom, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering how to save them. I was wondering what they would do when the checks finally stopped coming. The attacks didn't stay within the family. By Tuesday morning, the poison had seeped into my professional life. I received an urgent email from the legal team of the conglomerate acquiring my company. They had received a cease and desist letter claiming intellectual property theft. The claimant wasn't a competitor. It was Jason. I sat in my office, staring at the scanned document attached to the email. It was a masterpiece of delusion. Jason claimed that my signature scent, the one based on a specific extraction method I had patented 3 years ago, was actually derived from a concept he had sketched on a napkin during a family barbecue in 2019. He called himself the lead conceptual architect. He demanded a halt to the $60 million acquisition until his ownership stake of 80% was recognized. To anyone else, it was laughable. Jason couldn't tell the difference between ethanol and essential oil. But in the corporate world, even a frivolous lawsuit is a red flag. The buyers were spooked. They wanted clarification. They wanted the family issue resolved within 48 hours, or the deal was off. My phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, pressing the record button immediately. "You've done it now, Taylor," she said, her voice trembling not with sorrow, but with the high-pitched frequency of a victim who has been inconvenienced. "Your brother is distraught. Do you know he hasn't eaten? You're destroying his reputation because you can't share." "He's suing me, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "He's trying to tank the sale. If the deal falls through, nobody gets anything. Does he understand that?" "He's just protecting what's his," she snapped. "And don't you dare act like you built this alone. Who gave you the garage to work in that summer after college? Who paid for your first laptop? We are investors, Taylor." And Jason has always been the visionary. He has the mind for business. You have the hands for labor. It's a partnership. I listened to her, and for the first time I didn't feel the urge to argue facts. I realized I was looking at something pathological. This wasn't just greed. It was a psychological break from reality. Jason genuinely believed he owned my success. It's a phenomenon I'd read about. Narcissistic entitlement. To him, I wasn't a separate human being with my own agency. I was an extension of him, like an arm or a leg. If his arm picked up a gold nugget, he didn't thank the arm. He claimed the gold. In his mind, My 10 years of labor were just the mechanical execution of his divine will. He wasn't lying to hurt me. He was rewriting history to protect his fragile ego from the truth that he was mediocre. I'm not signing anything, I said. And tell Jason that if he pursues this legal claim, he will have to prove under oath that he knows the chemical formula. Does he want to do that? Don't you threaten us. My father's voice boomed from the background, taking over the speakerphone. You're a little girl who got lucky. Without our name, you're nothing. If you don't settle with your brother by Friday, we will make sure every investor in town knows you're a thief who stole from her own flesh and blood. We will bury you, Taylor. The line went dead. I put the phone down. The shaking in my hands had stopped completely. They thought they were negotiating with a daughter who craved their approval. They didn't realize they had just declared war on a CEO who had nothing left to lose. They wanted to talk about ownership? Fine. It was time to show them exactly who owned whom. I didn't go to social media. I didn't post a tearful video explaining my side of the story. I didn't text my friends for sympathy. Instead, I poured a cup of black coffee and let the part of me that was a sister die. In her place, a CEO stood up. My first call wasn't to a therapist. It was to the most aggressive intellectual property attorney in the state. His name was Sterling and he cost $800 an hour. When I walked into his glass-walled office, I didn't look like the girl who had fled a party in a 10-year-old sedan. I looked like a client who was ready to buy the building. They want to play dirty, I told him, sliding a flash drive across his mahogany desk. Let's play forensic. The next 3 days were a blur of cold, hard documentation. We didn't just build a defense, we built a fortress. I dug out the original lab journals from 2014, each page date-stamped and notarized. A habit I had picked up from a paranoid chemistry professor in college. I printed every email Jason had ever sent me regarding the company. They were humiliatingly simple. While he claimed to be the visionary, the emails showed him asking basic questions like, what is an aldehyde? And can we make it smell more like money? Sterling read them and laughed, a dry, sharp sound. He's claiming 80% ownership, but he can't even spell the name of the primary compound, he said. This isn't a lawsuit, Taylor. It's a suicide note for his reputation. Draft the cease and desist, I said. But don't send it yet. I want more. That afternoon I hired a private investigator. Not the kind you see in movies, but a forensic accountant who specialized in piercing corporate veils. My father's threat had been specific. He was desperate. The desperation in his voice when he demanded the settlement by Friday wasn't just greed. It was fear. Wealthy people don't panic over a 48-hour delay. People who are underwater do. Find out why they need the cash, I told the investigator. My brother acts like a billionaire, but he's renting a lifestyle. I want to know who owns the debt. For the rest of the week, I moved with precision. I secured my assets in protected trusts, reset every access point, and met privately with the buyers to present clear proof of authorship, patents, and my family's total lack of contribution. I didn't plead, I documented. By the end of the meeting, the buyers were not just reassured but angry on my behalf, authorizing their legal team to intervene if my brother tried to interfere with the sale. I was no longer reacting. I was preparing. That Saturday, a private investigator named Marcus arrived with a folder that hit my table like a verdict. My brother's problem wasn't just debt, it was hard money loans. High interest, short-term, collateral-driven. When I asked what collateral he could possibly have, Marcus showed me the answer. A forged loan agreement bearing my name. Attached was a power of attorney I had signed at 18, buried among the standard paperwork before college. My parents had used it to act financially on my behalf. For 3 years they had leveraged my credit to secure loans for my brother. I wasn't just betrayed, I was a co-signer on $600,000 of fraudulent debt. Marcus was blunt. I could pay or I could file a police report naming my parents. Prison was a real possibility. I chose neither. Instead, I bought the debt. At my brother's latest party, Champagne Investors Lies, I walked straight in. When he mocked me from the stage, I dropped the loan file on the table and told him calmly, I was now his creditor. The loans were in default. The collateral included the villa, his car, and, thanks to fraud, our parents' retirement accounts. Panic spread instantly. My parents protested. I didn't argue. I told them I wasn't keeping a cent. Every dollar recovered would go to a nonprofit helping victims of financial abuse rebuild their lives. This wasn't revenge. It was containment. They wouldn't hurt anyone else again. I left without looking back. 6 months later, the assets were liquidated. My parents downsized, their credit destroyed by their own actions. Their request for reconciliation came through a lawyer. I replied with a foreclosure notice. In my new lab overlooking the city, I finished my latest creation. A scent of sea salt, ozone, and cedar wood. Clean, pulled, free. I named it Liberty. I didn't keep my family. I kept myself.